And knowing how to walk with a walking stick correctly can improve your confidence in being out and about without the fear of falling. So I'm going to talk about the 6 most common mistakes people make when walking with a walking stick. Then I'll give you a step-by-step checklist to make sure you're avoiding these mistakes and that you're using a walking stick correctly. At the end of the video, I'll show you a few bonus tips to be less reliant and possibly even avoid needing to use a walking stick. My name's Brendon from Vuno Physiotherapy. My team and I work with people with disabilities, and we help people gain confidence and more independence so they can do the day-to-day activities that they want to do. So now let's get into today's video. So I once had this gentle see me for a physiotherapy session. Let's call him Steve for this video. He was this middle-aged gentleman, quite shy, mysterious, but from our conversations, I could tell he was always one of those people who was independent and didn't want to bother anyone, especially not his other family members and kids. But during a session, he was limping and walking around really slowly, and I could tell that he actually needed something to support him. When I brought up the idea of a walking stick, he didn't like this idea at all. He didn't want to look old, and walking around with this might make it look like he's needing extra help, which might worry his family. So this is the mistake a lot of people make. They don't use a walking stick when they should. Some people have it in the back of their mind, while some other people know that they should be using it, but they just try to avoid it altogether. So Steve and I chatted for a little bit longer, and eventually he realized that if he did have a fall or his injury got worse because he was limping around so much, that would actually be something that would worry the family. So eventually he did start using a walking stick. I did reassure him that it can be something that's just temporary and he doesn't even have to use it all the time. But we'll come back to Steve's story in a minute, because what happened afterwards was actually quite nice and would actually be a nice lesson for a lot of people. But how do you know if you should be using a walking stick? The easiest thing to do is just ask your doctor or your physiotherapist. But if you don't have access to one right now, a general advice is this. You might need to use a walking stick if you've had a fall in the past, you're having some pain that's limiting your movement, you look and feel unsteady while you're walking, which means that you might be at risk of falling, or you feel weak in your legs. Mistake number 2 is still using a walking stick when you should actually be using a more supportive aid. So this is pretty much the opposite of number 1. Some people just want to keep using a walking stick even though they're not safe to do so anymore. Some of the things that I look out for that tells me that someone's no longer safe for a walking stick is having a fall while they're using a walking stick, they're having pain, weakness, or balance issues that are just getting worse, or they're really overly relying on the walking stick as they walk. For example, the walking stick is shaky when they're walking, they're really leaning over to the side or on top of the walking stick, or they're starting to get pain somewhere in their wrist, elbow, or shoulder. In the future, I'm going to do another video on what other walking aids are out there and when to use them. If I've made it already, I'm just going to link it at the end of this video. If I haven't made it yet, just hit subscribe below so that you can be notified when it does come out. But for now, on to the next few mistakes. These are the more common ones that you might see other people talk about, which is why I'll go through this a little bit quicker. Mistake number 3, holding the walking stick on the wrong side. The general recommendation is that we hold the walking stick on this opposite side of the leg that's feeling sore or weak. So if your left leg is sore, you hold the walking stick on the right hand side. When people hold the walking stick on the same side as the injured leg, they can walk a little bit strange. But more importantly, they also use a lot of energy and effort with every step that they take. I've sometimes used the analogy of a barrel being rolled down a hill, but the barrel is a square shape. So it's just not very efficient. When we walk with the walking stick on the opposite hand, it can actually support that injured leg really well. And it's like rolling around, barrel down. We can make use of momentum to help us walk. It's a lot easier, a bit more effortless, and probably a lot safer as well. Mistake number 4, adjusting the walking stick to the wrong height. If it's too low, we end up stooping over. If it's too high, the walking stick can't actually support us very well. And we use up a lot of effort just to bring it along with us. Mistake number 5, not knowing where to place the walking stick while we're using it. If it's too close in front of us, we're at risk of tripping over it. If it's too far, we end up reaching forward for the ground. Or sometimes people just don't put it down in the right time that it actually gives them support while they walk. So the recommendation is that we put the walking stick down at the same time that we put our injured leg down. That way that injured or sore leg is supported by our whole body and the walking stick. And again, we're making use of that momentum to help us walk easier and faster. Now let's talk about the last big mistake. With this one, I don't actually think many people realize this because it happens over such a long period of time and it happens really slowly. Basically, it's that people become reliant on the walking stick. To explain it better, let's go back to my patient Steve. A concern that Steve had was he thought once he starts using it, it's all downhill from here and he's going to be stuck with it forever. And then I reassured him that there are things that he can do to reduce his chances of this needing to happen. And with a bit of hard work, he got to a point where he only needed to use a walking stick in very rare occasions. So a big mistake that people make is that once they start using a walking stick, they start feeling good and start walking well with it, that eventually they actually forget to work on the reason that they needed to use the walking stick in the first place. So these reasons are usually the pain, weakness, or balance. And there's always things that we can do to improve these. And yes, usually these are caused by some other health condition or injury. And sometimes we don't have full control over that. But there's always things that's within our control that can possibly help us. Let me explain. So let's talk about a common health condition that people face that can be quite overwhelming, and often people don't feel like they have much control over it. So an example is osteoarthritis. This is the condition that Steve was facing, and it's actually one of those conditions that's related to our age, genetics, past injuries, activities we did in the past. And these things are things we can't change right now. And because of that, it feels like we can't control the condition and therefore we can't control the pain, weakness, and balance issues. And so Steve felt that the only way that he could work through this is by getting a surgery, or he just had to put up with it. Now we're talking about osteoarthritis, but the idea and the story that follows can be applied to any other health condition. So I spoke to Steve about the research around his condition and just the benefits of staying healthy in general. The idea of him staying more independent for longer really motivated him. So what he ended up doing was he ended up eating a lot better, sleeping better, managing his stress well, and exercising a lot more deliberately. He did get a little bit of guidance because he still had pain, but the result was because he was taking care of his health, he started feeling and moving a lot better. Just to drive this example home a little bit more, I remember speaking to Steve about imagining himself having a twin brother. And that twin brother had the exact same health conditions that he had, but he decided to eat poorly, smoke and drink, not sleep at all, not manage his stress levels, and avoid any exercises altogether. I asked him, with this type of lifestyle and environment, would it be a huge surprise if his condition just kept getting worse? And compare this to the exact opposite of that, which one would have the higher chance of him getting better? So now I always encourage people to be this version of Steve. But just a quick reminder that these are general recommendations. Just speak to your doctor or your physiotherapist for advice that's actually more specific to you and your condition. Okay, so now I'll give you a step-by-step checklist on how to walk with a walking stick correctly. So put the walking stick on the opposite side of the leg that's feeling weak or sore. If you have pain or weakness on both sides, just figure out which is feeling worse at the time. Adjust the walking stick to the right height. Find your wrist crease. Stand in a relaxed position. Match the height of the walking stick to that level of your wrist crease. Most walking sticks are adjustable, so if you had to adjust it, just loosen the lock at the top and then press the button down. Move the stick up if you want to make it shorter, or pull it down if you want to make it longer, and then recheck the height. You might not get it right the first time, but that's okay because you're going to trial a few times to see what feels best for you anyway. Go for a walk with the walking stick. A common thing I say is just use it to feel the ground. You're not trying to put all your weight through it. Put it down the same time as you do your opposite leg. If it's your first time, just do what feels natural. We can practice the technique a bit later. As you go for a walk, just check how it feels. You can adjust the height one level up or one level down, depending on what feels more comfortable and safe at the time. Just make sure that it's not too high, that you have too much bend in your elbow. If there's too much bend, you can't use your full arm to support yourself when you walk. This becomes important in case of an emergency where you do have to put it down quickly. And also just make sure it's not too low that you're having to reach down for the ground. A safety check that I always look at is that the walking stick isn't too shaky when it's on the ground. You're not excessively putting your weight over the stick, and it's not starting to trigger pain in the shoulder or in the wrists. If any of these are happening, you might need a more supportive walking device like a walker. Again, I'll have a link at the end of the video to show you different options for walking aids. The next one is figure out when exactly you're going to be using it. Some people only need to use it when they're going outdoors where the ground might be a bit uneven, there's unexpected obstacles along the way, or they're going to be walking long distances in places they're unfamiliar with. Some people need to use it every single time they're outdoors. Some people need to use it every time they're indoors, but not outdoors. There's some people who only need to use it indoors sometimes, on days where they're feeling terrible, or only in the mornings when they're feeling really stiff. If you want to play it safe, you can just always use it everywhere. But if you want to figure out which of these categories you fall under, you just have to be self-aware of your capabilities. You might have to test yourself out, and that's where exercise and practice comes into play when using a walking stick. During exercise, you can really figure out how good your balance is. And when you practice walking outside with a friend or with someone else, you can learn what you can and can't do. If you're absolutely not sure, just ask your physiotherapist about this. The thing with this is just finding the right balance between safety and being able to do things and becoming reliant on it, and over time actually getting worse. If people become reliant on a walking stick, over time it can actually cause more balance and weakness issues. And that's because we don't use the muscles that we need to. If we don't use it, we'll lose it. But again, we can counteract this by throwing in strengthening exercise and balancing exercise into our routines. So since we're talking about exercise, we can actually talk about ways to become less reliant on the walking stick and possibly avoid the need to use it. So we want to address the reason that we needed to use the walking stick in the first place. If you're using it for pain or weakness in the leg, make sure you get a medical checkup from your doctor and that you're receiving the treatments that you need to for your specific condition. After that, we want to focus on doing what we can to build a healthy body. A simple thing to remember is the acronym SNAPS. We want to improve our smoking, nutrition levels, alcohol intake, physical activity levels, sleep, stress, social connections. You don't have to work on all of these at once. Just pick one thing to work on. And sometimes that one thing can actually make a world of difference. If the reason you're using it is because of a falls risk, you want to reduce your falls risk as much as you can. Just make sure you have supportive and non-slip footwear. Check with your doctor if you're taking any medications that might be causing that balance issue. If there is, just check if there's any alternatives that you can take instead. Sometimes as well, if you're taking multiple medications, these can all react and actually cause you to lose a bit of your balance. So the advice with that is always get your medications checked with your doctor and just double check that you're only taking the medications that you need to. Sometimes I've seen people with a whole list of medications, and some of those medications they don't actually have to use anymore. But because they haven't got it checked, they're still using it. Get your vision checked. A big part of our balance is our vision. Sometimes when people update their eyewear, their falls risk also decreases. Check that you have good sensation in your feet and that you can feel the ground. This tip and the vision tip is a lot more important for people with diabetes. Get your home assessed for any falls or tripping hazards. I'll leave a link to a home safety sheet in the captions below. And lastly, start a balance specific exercise program. To do this, you can check your local community for balance groups. You can look up general balance exercises online, or you can go to a physiotherapist to get a more personalized exercise program for yourself. If you're interested, I've made a few other videos on my YouTube channel just about exercise programs that you can do. If you want to work with me for anything more specific, there's a link below for a free 15-minute telehealth consultation. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in other supportive walking devices, you can click this video here or this other related video that I think you might be interested in.